Hello, Tracy Noriega here, paying it forward to you and granting you permission to choose you. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Michele Ross, for coming here to speak about all the different ways that we can heal pain with plant medicines.
Thank you. I'm so excited to share my journey just because I know that so many of us are suffering and pain. And, just because you don't know that these medicine exists or how to use it doesn't mean that, you shouldn't be empowered to tap into it and change your life.
Yes, yes, very much so. And so everyone who's out there, I reached out to Dr. Michele Ross here because she really hits on something. My 15 years being in healthcare and such, seeing patients in pain, whether something just an injury or chronic cancer, fibromyalgia, I mean, the litany of things that are out there, and watching how many patients are prescribed these painkillers that just exacerbate their already dis-ease that they have, and give them all these side effects and then make them groggy or counteract with other things, and that there really hasn't been an embracing by the Western medicine of these alternative medicines, these natural medicines, these plant medicines. And so that's why I'm bringing Dr. Michele Ross in here, because Dr. Ross has done so much work. She knew she wanted to be a doctor at the age of 5, which is just so cool, and has done her own journey and has had her own pain as well that has led her to where she is now in being one of those, I would say a pioneer in just making sure that cannabis and all the other plant medicines get their due recognition. So, Dr. Michele, would you like to explain like how you got to be into medicine and then made the jump over into plant medicine? Where'd that come from?
Sure. So if you had talked to 5-year-old Michele who wanted to be a doctor and cure the world of like all the diseases, or at least drug addiction, that's where I was passionate about, because I grew up in a neighborhood where a lot of my neighbors and a lot of families were addicted to drugs. That was really my goal of being a doctor, to help people get off drugs. And I would have never thought I would be where I am now, where I'm not necessarily recommending, drugs of abuse, but we're talking about psychedelic drugs like magic mushrooms or cannabis, right? Marijuana was considered a drug of abuse, at least when I was growing up, right? I didn't know people who used medical marijuana. I grew up in the East Coast in New Jersey, and so even cannabis was considered bad by my family, by my peers. I grew up without any experience with it, but I knew that I wanted to help people, and I actually started off as a scientist, working in the lab. I ended up going to Texas, working on my PhD in a department of molecular psychiatry, where I was studying. I actually thought I was going to be studying drug addiction, and I ended up actually learning about the cannabinoid system, and actually about how cannabis and certain components of it could actually grow brain cells. So like I came into this being like, okay, I'm going to stop people from using cannabis, from using heroin, from using cocaine. I'm still very much against some of the other harder drugs that we know cause very bad things to the brain, right? Like methamphetamine, not good. Heroin, we know not good, kills a lot of people, right? But I definitely changed my mind about cannabis. And it's funny, they don't teach you a lot about the endocannabinoid system in medical school or in graduate school. Like, believe it or not, I was in a department of molecular psychiatry. That's a department where we were studying, hey, what do drugs do on the brain? What do pharmaceutical drugs like antidepressants, how do they work? Like, how do all these different drugs work? What do they do to the brain? We didn't know really anything about cannabis. It wasn't in our textbooks. It was like a page of like, hey, cannabis is a drug of abuse. It binds to these receptors next. And like other drugs that were sold by pharmaceutical companies had like pages and pages and pages for us to learn about them, right? Because that's what doctors and scientists do. They make or prescribe these medicines, right? So if it wasn't something that was sold by pharma, it wasn't taught in our books. So it was sort of interesting. So here I am now, totally flipped to the other side. And that's because, I've seen how cannabis and some of these other plant medicines have helped people. But personally, it was my own dive or spiral into all these health issues that really led me to cannabis. I've been on, goodness, so many different regular pharmaceutical drugs, from morphine to antidepressants, things that may be suicidal, things that almost killed me and left me, in the hospital, on my deathbed. And here we have cannabis. That is something that you can't overdose on. You can maybe sleep a lot of days on if you take too much, take too many pot brownies
or get too many
things.
munchies and end up eating a whole bag of chips by yourself.
Yeah. But here I was, due to different things, including medical errors, right? We talked, I think you touched on a little bit. I have fibromyalgia. I also have nerve damage. I've had traumatic brain injury. Like, I've had a heart attack, like, from some of the medical errors that happened, made blood clots. Like, I've literally been on my deathbed where, doctors thought I wasn't going to make it. And if I did, I would always be on disability. I wouldn't be working as a scientist. I wouldn't be writing. Like, my husband would have to take care of me. I was in a wheelchair and an oxygen tank, like, for a year. Like, I've been through it all. And for me, really, the key game changer in, operating like you see me now, as an author, as a speaker, going back to my normal life, and not as someone on disability who, quite frankly, was supposed to give up, was going off my medications and back onto cannabis and other plant medicine. So I want to just say, like, I hit the rock bottom. I hit where, I was so hopeless on these medications that weren't actually helping me with my pain, that were making me, wake up in sweats. When you're on morphine, it's not a fun thing when you wake up and you're in withdrawal and you need your morphine pill to continue on your day, right? Like, that didn't feel right to me, especially as an addiction scientist. Here I was like, I think I'm dependent. That's okay, because I'm dependent on opioids, but, like, this is not living. This is not the quality of life I'm used to. And I was so depressed. I wanted to kill myself. I tried. My husband stopped me. Like, it was, I went through it all, and it took me actually going to cannabis to actually get off of these medications, as well as, heal the pain, heal the inflammation, heal the depression, heal some of the trauma from being, a victim of, I would say, medical errors and things like that, microaggressions by some of the medical community, in treating me. We all have chronic, I think, either trauma or PTSD sometimes when you're a chronic illness patient, especially somebody who has dealt with, life-threatening situations. We deal with that trauma. We have PTSD from being a patient. So I've been through all that, and I've survived. Like, I'm living my best life now. So that's the message I want to say, is, like, doesn't matter how messed up you are, how many years you've been struggling, it may not help you overnight. Let's just say cannabis can't, it doesn't cure anything. It doesn't completely, overnight all of your medical issues are solved. But within time, you're going to start healing things, and you can get to a really good place after, some time with cannabis. I've been using it now, goodness, probably for almost like 8 years daily now. And it has really changed my life.
Well, yeah, you bring up a whole bunch of good points, and let's see if we can tackle some of them, because there's people out there who definitely, there's, the pandemic that we're going through. So you got people who are dealing with a lot of, mental and emotional issues, the isolation and the, maybe lots of loss, whether grief or loss of, actual people or jobs or lifestyles, even, all those things are loss. And then just this, this anxiety. And so that's one area where I'd like you to talk about, like, what kind of, because you've also written a book on Crantum, which I'd never heard of and had to actually look at. But how does, if we take, let's take mental health and emotional health first, and people who are having these anxiety, who know they have depression, who may be in just a little slump, and others who have been dealing with it for years, what have you found is really effective, and where would they start?
Sure. So there's so many different ways to work with mood disorders, whether they're at the clinical level, like you have anxiety, you have depression, or you're just struggling through, what is really difficult times right now. A lot of people, again, are either dealing with loss, or they're dealing with a shift in identity. Somebody that might have been a busy professional is now juggling their kids at home and having to take off of work and be a mom instead for the very first time. We've seen a lot of that. Who am I? What is happening? What am I doing? So, everyone has a different brain. I want to put this out here. This plant medicine is very much personalized medicine, right? What works for someone for their anxiety may not work for the next person, right? So For example, THC can cause anxiety in some people, and in other
Yeah.
people, it reduces their anxiety, right? Why does it do that? Well, we know that, with antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs, it's very much the same way. You can't just look at somebody and say, I know exactly what brand will work for you and what dose. It's sort of like a lot of, trial and error. And so I don't want to say that there's a ton of trial and error with plant medicine, but there is a lot of different plants, a lot of different combinations, a lot of different doses that you can play with. So, what may work for someone is not going to work for everyone. But here's some starting points. If you do have anxiety, a lot of people do start off, say, with CBD or cannabidiol, which is a cannabinoid that's found in the cannabis plant. It's not really psychoactive, so it's not going to give you a high that THC or cannabis, marijuana might make you feel. So when people want to feel in control, like they don't want to lose control, they don't want to be high, say, in front of their kids or something like that, they might start off with something like CBD oil and, put a couple of drops or, a dropper full under their tongue. You're looking at something like around like 20 milligrams of CBD. For some people, that is helpful in reducing their anxiety. How it works is it actually increases the levels of endocannabinoids in your body. So your own marijuana-like compounds that actually bind to receptors that are in your brain. They help reduce, stress hormones. They help, they attach to serotonin receptors and actually help relax you, relieve tension. So they can act in a very similar way to anti-anxiety drugs or antidepressants. For some people that are super stressed out, though, they might need something a little bit more stronger. So some people really like microdoses of THC. And so what is a microdose of THC or the active ingredient in marijuana? Yeah, what is that? Right? So in certain states, there's different products. In states like Colorado or California or Nevada and some of the other bigger states now or more medical states are starting to have products where these would be edible. So something like a mint or candy that has a low dose of cannabis in it. So this could be 5 milligrams, 3 milligrams, 2.5. I like to say that a microdose is anything under 5. Now, some people may take 5 milligrams of THC, eat it, and be very high. So if that's not a microdose to you, that's okay. For me, actually, my microdose level of threshold of what could I take before I get high? Even though I've been taking cannabis for years, 1.5 milligrams is my microdose threshold. So I literally have to get what they sell in the stores and break it in half because anything over that will actually make me not uncomfortably high, but just sleepy, actually. THC tends to make me sleepy, but at a threshold that's underneath that, it helps me with my anxiety, helps me with my pain, helps me focus a little better because when you're in pain, you're anxious and you're not focused because you're focused on your pain, right? So THC in small amounts can be really helpful during the day for anxiety. There's a lot of patients that actually take it sort of as a substitute for Xanax. And it's funny because, again, people are like, wait, so you're taking little bits of weed during the day. Isn't that like being high all day? And it's like, no. If you're anxious and that tiny little dose is just going to help reduce the stress, make you more present, make you more focused, you're not high, you're just normal. You're back to normal, right? And so then again, everyone will have a dose where even if you're an anxious person, right? Say you're 2.5 milligrams, twice a day makes you normal. But yes, if you took 10 milligrams during the day, you'd be high. So it's like any of these medications where the wrong dose will give you the wrong effect, right? You take too many opioids, you're going to be high. You take it just enough, you're going to be out of pain. So I always want to stress with people, it's not necessarily that, say, one substance is bad, like THC is bad and CBD is good. There are different cannabinoids or different plant medicines for different people. And again, how the dosing can change your experience on them greatly. So I do want to stress, if you've ever, maybe considered or used something like, hey, I tried CBD gummies, they didn't do anything for me. Maybe it's actually these small amounts of THC that could be really, really helpful. And, again, it's interesting because sometimes THC can be scary because it's something you might have to get from a medical marijuana dispensary or what we call adult use dispensary, which just means anyone over the age of 21, even without a doctor's recommendation, can access that. And it can be a little bit confusing because you're like, well, I could just get CBD online. Why would I go to a place and like there's marijuana everywhere? Right. But, a lot of these products in there are actually very medically focused. Some of them are formulated by doctors and things like that. So I just want everyone to keep an open mind when it comes to, dealing with some of these things, right? If you don't want to deal with Xanax, or you don't want to deal with an antidepressant and prescriptions that, by the way, can be very addictive, very hard to withdraw from over the years if you take them. You know, a lot of people are starting to take these drugs for the very first time during the pandemic. And I'm like, please be careful, because, you know, a year from now, when you're still using it and you want to get off it, it can be very terrible to withdraw from. And sometimes it's actually harder to withdraw from prescription anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants than it is even some of the opioids. So it can be very, very difficult. So
very
like make
good
that
point.
decision.
Yeah, very good point, because those you can't just stop, you know, whereas with THC or you know, CBD or CBD, and it's like you stop it, it's not like you're going to have, you know, a reactive something happening to you, your withdrawals, which, you know, they never talk to you about, right? So thank you for bringing that up. And one thing I want you to really speak about, because I know I've done this, I don't know how many times with friends I've, you know, suggested using, and I always say, use less, give it enough time before you decide to do more. So as a doctor, can you please tell them exactly why? Because, you know, there is that fine line, and there's enough time that it has to go through the body system, and what that can do to, you know, where then you believe that you had a bad experience, but that was because you decided you weren't going to wait.
Yeah, so we're just to make it very clear for everyone, when we're talking about cannabis edibles that contain THC versus, say, like smoking or something, it's just funny because when you smoke cannabis, you sort of feel the effects within 5 minutes, like at most. So you're like, am I high? Am I not high? You know that you're high, so like you're good, right? When you eat an edible, it has to be digested, you know, through your stomach and your gut, and it's interesting in the liver. The liver actually turns THC, that active ingredient in cannabis, into another chemical. So it's called hydroxy THC. Hydroxy THC is much stronger than THC. So if you've ever smoked a joint or know somebody that smoked a joint, they're just like, hi, whatever. And then that same person will take an edible and they're like, oh my goodness, this is way, way too much. Like some people love edibles, some people don't. But the reason why is that, again, that THC is turned into way stronger THC, and so it can make a much, you know, stronger effect on you. Now, the whole thing with the timing, right? So it can take up to an hour for an edible to work, and depending on how your liver is, especially if you're chronically ill patient who's on a lot of medications, your liver could be sort of like not functioning its best. So it could be taking a while for it to go process that THC and turn it into something. So you're like sitting there, everyone else is already either out of pain, high, whatever. Again, you know, whatever you're taking that cannabis edible to begin with, maybe it's just to relax, right? But you're taking it and you're waiting, and it's an hour, 15 minutes, and you're like, it did not work. And then you take it and it literally hits you like at the hour 20 mark. And so now you've just taken another edible, but the first bite, you know, got you really high. Now an hour 20 minutes later, and now you have to wait, and now an hour later that other edible is going to kick in. Now you're going to be double high. Like it's like too much.
And then you're wanting to go to ER, right? And they're going to laugh at you.
Oh my goodness. Well, and this is what we really recommend, is to not go to the ER unless you're having a severe reaction to cannabis, which is actually very rare, right? So what can cannabis do if you take too much? You know, say you totally messed up, right? You know, you thought the edible, the chocolate
it tasted
said
good.
10.
You ate the whole thing.
Yeah, you know, you took 1,000 milligrams of cannabis. What do you do now? Some people will experience some side effects, like they might feel sweating, they might feel nausea or vomiting. It's actually normal to vomit if you take way too much THC. That's sort of the side effect. I mean, it's good. It's going to come out of your system, right? But it's not something to go, oh, I have to go to the hospital. I was throwing up the THC. Yeah, and not a pleasant experience, but if anyone's known from alcohol, right? If you take too much alcohol, you throw up. That's an experience. You don't go to the hospital because that happened, you know, oh goodness, I overconsumed. So it's really important for new patients or new users to understand what is normal overconsumption. Like what are those effects, so you manage them. It's not like, oh my God, I'm going to die from the marijuana, help. Like I gotta go to the doctor. The doctor then laughs at you. You have a huge ER bill. All they give you is like water or something. I would say if you are a new consumer of cannabis, especially edible products, it's really important to have things that can help you, you know, get, I would say, sober up. So things that make you on high really fast. This is great information. Orange juice, citrus helps you sort of, you know, actually get the THC out of your system a little bit faster. Coffee, anything with caffeine can also help you sort of become more alert. Some people swear by things like with peppercorns in it. So there's certain ingredients there that actually help the THC come off of the receptors. Also, a really common one that can help is CBD oil. So CBD can actually block some of the cannabis receptors, those CB1 receptors. So sometimes, taking CBD oil under the tongue, a full drop or even two, can actually help reduce the high and get you back to normal.
Wow. I
Yeah, it's
never
so
knew that.
important.
And let's make sure it's CBD oil without THC. We're talking.
I mean, even if it has like a teeny, okay, so if it has a teeny bit of THC in it, like for example, full spectrum CBD oil might have like very, very small THC. That's still okay to use because it's going to have like, again, like 20 to 1. It's going to have 20 times more CBD in it. So it's still useful. If that's all you have in your house and you're like,
Yes.
what do I do? I don't want to be high. There's all companies making sprays and things like that. I'm more actually going to be working with one. It's really important because that's a big thing, right? As a patient, right? Oh, goodness. I don't know. Like there's a guy at the door that wants to talk to me, or I'm a mom and I need to take care of my kids. Somehow I get too high. I don't want to do this. And so that's what I think holds a lot of people back sometimes, is that they're worried that, they might miss dose. And that's really important because sometimes you have pain that's variable, especially when you have a disease like mine, fibromyalgia. Some days I have very little pain. Some days I'm for God, like I take all the cannabis, right? And for me, working as a professional, I cross that, very thin line of how medication do I need to function versus just a little bit will make me cross the line and I'll be loopy and out of it or sleepy and I wouldn't be able to work, right?
Yeah.
And so navigating that is so important for new patients. And it's like you need something in your medicine cabinet that makes you feel confident that even if you take a little bit too much, you can dial that dose down. So CBD oil is really sort of the antidote, to have in your medicine cabinet if you choose to go the THC route in terms of medicating for anxiety or pain or something like that.
So now let's talk about pain, like physical pain. And then we have the acute pain that could be like a really bad migraine, could be menstrual cramps, could be, you got an injury and something's, you banged up your leg or your knee or pulled your back, to then the people who are experiencing like fibromyalgia or other chronic pain, maybe they have another condition that just, even rheumatoid arthritis, etc.
Mm-hmm.
How would you tell those people who would normally go to their cabinets and grab, I think this is something that a lot of people don't think about, is that even the ibuprofen is like not that great for you, and some
your poor
people live
stomach
by
lining.
it. Yeah. And they don't realize like how much damage it does to their liver and kidney, and that
Mm-hmm.
this is actually a much better, alternative for you, not only for how you feel, but that you're not going to be damaging the rest of your organs. So how would you recommend to those people who are sort of like, well, do I need to do that for a headache? I'll just stay with my Aleve or such, versus, maybe it is CBD oil, or would it be CBD and a little bit of THC? And then we haven't even talked about kratom. So how would you do it?
Yes. Okay. So, first off, I would talk a little bit about the benefits of these cannabinoids, including CBD, for both your liver health and your gut health, and why it's so important that chronically ill patients that have been on medications for a long time actually choose these plant medicines. Now, we have cannabinoid receptors in our gut. So what's really, really beautiful is that whether you're taking THC, CBD, or both, you're really going to have these receptors in the gut be activated, and it's going to reduce inflammation. It has antioxidant powers. It's really, really going to start healing the gut. And we know that most chronically ill patients, things like leaky gut or, just like pain, like honestly, gut pain is a huge, huge problem. With almost all patients, and it's whether it's a natural, symptom of their disease or it's a side effect of the medications they're on. Goodness, again, your Aleve will burn your stomach lining. We know this. It's really nasty, and it takes a while to heal from that. And what's just nice is that these oils, right? They even have MCT oil, which is anti-inflammatory, which can help again promote gut healing. So super helpful. So one of the things to note again is like all about harm reduction. If you can't get off your Aleve and you also need to add the CBD in there, that's great. But I would say if you have gut issues, go for a tincture that again is going to go through the system rather than like a pill or something like that. I've just seen a lot more benefits with the tincture versus the pills and things like that. Now, in terms of pain, obviously there's different forms of pain. Some patients may take, edibles, some may smoke. Smoking is very, again, whether you're vaping or smoking flower, I know some people are not comfortable with that, and that's okay. But some people do find sort of instant, like 5-minute relief for pain with smoking, or what we call inhalation and in doctor speak. But I would say that the easiest and most accessible way sometimes for pain, especially like joint pain, arthritis pain, back pain, things like that, is cannabis topicals. Now you have your ones that just contain CBD, so they can be bought online or in the stores, CBD stores, like even health stores are selling these things now. You can find them everywhere. They usually are formulated with either essential oils or menthol or something like that, because to be honest, CBD is not as strong as THC. So I usually see that you need sort of repeated applications to get inflammation down, to get pain down and things like that. So that's why they have the menthol and things like that. So you sort of have immediate pain relief while these things are working. THC cream is much stronger. So cannabis creams, they all usually look like green instead of white or something like that, because they have the marijuana extract in there. But THC is stronger for muscle spasms, for pain relief, but it's going to have to be purchased at a dispensary, again, either with a medical marijuana card or in an adult use state. So that's something to keep in mind. You're like, where do I live? Do I have access to this? But if you have very, very severe pain and it hasn't responded well to CBD cream, for me personally, I like to choose THC creams. It just definitely is something where if I'm having severe pain, the THC seems to work a little bit better for me. Again, everyone's a little bit different, right? Maybe somebody doesn't want to smell like cannabis. Like I actually make this cannabis cream at my home because, to be honest, I have fibromyalgia. The pain is everywhere, right? So my back, so my neck, my legs, and this and that. And there, again, I can go weeks where I feel great, and then there's other weeks where I'm really stressed out. I've been working myself too much, didn't eat healthy, and I'm flared up, right? And so those are the days where I'm just like, I'll take my green cream, coat myself multiple times a day, but now I smell like marijuana, right? And it's like it's a certain smell, right? And it's like if you want to be discreet or something like that, you're like, nope, everyone knows what's all over me, And so there's different products that you can take, but you just have to like be mindful. It's like the thing that might not be as effective, that has no odor, is going to be very discreet, but like it might not be the strongest thing for yourself. So I always tell people to like manage expectations. Like you might have your work cream. You're like, okay, I got like the minty CBD one for the day. Like, so nobody knows what's going on. But like, as soon as I get home, I'm going to go put on my green stuff and feel better. So again, it's just, you got to figure out like what works for you with your lifestyle. But the topicals have an amazing success rate in terms of pain relief. Arthritis patients, when we're talking especially about like older people, seniors, with arthritis, a lot of them are like, I don't want to smoke the marijuana, but they're fine using a cannabis cream. And so it's really cool to see, all these different products that are on the market or that you can even make yourself. Like my book, CBD Oil for Health, it's funny, is like it has all these recipes that you can use for either health or beauty or bath. You can make CBD bath salts and things like that. You can soak in, with your muscles and things like that, feel better. But like you can turn cannabis products into other things, when you're at home, which is really fun. There's machines where you can make like cannabis butter, you can make CBD butter and then put in your food or put in beauty products and things like that. So the biggest thing I get from patients is that cannabis isn't covered by health insurance. I can't afford, oh goodness, this $80 lotion that is like, in a bottle that's this big that is infused with THC. And I tell people, you know what these lotions are? It's literally like peppermint oil, coconut oil, and cannabis. So if you got those 3 ingredients, you can make it at home yourself. You make a big bucket. That's what I do, because otherwise, if I had to purchase the amount that I use per day, I'd be spending, hundreds of dollars a day on medicine. And so you have to get sort of crafty when it comes to cannabis or when it comes to CBD if you're going to use it daily as a chronic pain patient. But it is totally worth it because then you also have control over what's in those products. You can know that you're not using weird preservatives or, food colorings or things like that you don't want in your products because you are going to absorb it if you eat it or you put it on your skin. So it's like, learn about this plant, learn how to use it. But, I would say go to the dispensaries or go to online products, learn what works for you. Does CBD work for you in a lotion? Do you need THC? Do you need something stronger? You
Mm.
know, do you like smoking? Do you like eating? What is it you like? And then you can figure out from there, okay, this is what I like. I can sort of make these things at home myself. Again, obviously using legal products. Like if
Yeah.
you want to make a cannabis cream at home, please go to the dispensary, purchase legal cannabis to go make it at home yourself, or grow if you are in a legal state.
Yeah.
But I would always suggest, you know, check your laws about what you can do and can't do. But I think there's a lot of benefits for patients, you know, learning how to work with these medicines themselves at home.
Well, that's a good thing to bring up, at least for the states. And I know you've had your own dealings with the DEA. Um, is
Not the DEA. It was actually the LAPD.
Oh,
Thankfully,
the
I've never met the
LAPD. Okay,
DEA.
well,
Yeah.
thank goodness. But when for because I'm sure you can only speak about the states, but for people who may live in states where it's not available, are they still okay to buy these things online? And I know that your website has quite a few that you endorse and that you're also an affiliate for it. And so you know, highly recommend them and use them yourself. So if you could speak to that, because I know there's people out there, not everybody gets to live in a you know, cannabis friendly state.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because I've lived in non-cannabis friendly states. I actually did my PhD in Dallas, so I know it's like not to be able to access these things or to go back. You know, when I do
Mhm.
speaking engagements before, you know, the world of COVID, I traveled to almost every state, and then it was weird to be like, okay, I'm packing and can't put my medicine here because I could get
Right.
arrested if I get off this airplane, you know, with it in my bags and things like that. So, in terms of, you know, full spectrum or broad spectrum products. Again, I find it easier for patients, especially again, because most moms could be drug tested at any point. It's like, it's
Mhm.
hard. It's difficult being a mom. And there's been a lot of like problems with moms get flagging positive for THC, even though they were just using a tiny little bit amount in full
Yeah.
spectrum products. So broad spectrum products are products that have CBD plus the terpenes plus all the other components of you know, hemp extract without the THC. So you will never flag on a test. So there are companies like, for example, Helix is a really good one that has formulations that have you know, other herbs besides CBD that will support either pain formulas or anxiety formulas and things like that. That's a really good one. And then there's other ones. Real Wellness is a company that I am really behind. They also are formulated by somebody who has is working on their doctorate in Chinese medicine, and so they combine CBD with different things like skull cap and things like that. That's that's my passion. Is like, hey, CBD is great, but if you're not going to use it with THC, I think that is really important to have these supporting herbs and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, you need a little mushrooms, or you need a little this. I think that everyone is so messed, like we're so messed up, to be honest, like with our chronic
We
illness, with our sad American diet, with our sleep issues, that, you know, depending on just one thing, like just that CBD or just that THC is not going to help provide balance that we're looking for. So I
yeah.
think that we need to look to multiple plant medicines to really support our health. And so you mentioned the kratom, right?
Yes,
That was
yes.
a
And I had to
surprising
look that
thing.
up. I was like, wait, what in the heck is this? Is this a, I thought first it was a new strand of cannabis. Yeah.
Yeah, you
But
know, there are
yeah,
sorry, yeah, there are CBD kratom stores, and it's funny because people are like, so it's CBD. I'm like, no,
yeah.
that's just a brand name that has nothing to do with it. It's a separate plant, and it actually activates the opioid system and other receptors too. For example, it binds to serotonin receptors and things like that. But kratom is not actually the chemical. It's not like CBD.
Yeah.
Kratom is a plant, and the leaves are ground into a powder. You can drink it like a tea, you can take it in capsules and things like that, but it has a lot of chemicals in it, just like cannabis does. So it's like this very cool multifunctional plant that we're just learning about. But a lot of people do use it for pain. They use it for also mood lifting and things like that. It like literally does like a ton of things, which is funny because it's like there's so many things that you compare it to with cannabis or CBD where, you know, okay, how could one plant help you go to sleep, but also help you focus, but
Yeah.
also relieve pain? Like, how's it doing all the things? And it's because it's not like a pharmaceutical where it's just activating one receptor or one pathway. It is actually has hundreds of compounds that are anti-inflammatory, they're antioxidants that fight cancer. Like we're learning that it could be useful for Alzheimer's. There's clinical
Wow.
research and trials for kratom, which again, primarily targets the opioid system, but also has effects on the acetylcholine system. We know that acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that's really, really important for Alzheimer's, and we don't see enough of that neurotransmitter in patients with that. So it's like my book called Kratom is Medicine really focuses on, hey, what do we know about this plant? Is it safe? You know, the things you might have heard about in the news, are they real? You know, are people using this? How many people are using this? What are they using it for? What is the research? You know, and it's really important. Kratom is something that I use as a fibromyalgia patient because I do have no tolerance for THC whatsoever. Hilariously, even as a user for years and years and years, I get sleepy during the day on it. So for me, I had to find something that would help relieve pain, but not cause me to go to sleep. And so I found it was like almost like microdosing multiple different medicines. Like I use medicinal mushrooms. I use a little bit of kratom that helps work on my opioid system. And then I take, you know, a tiny little bit of THC, like 1.25 milligrams of THC during the day. So like for me, all of my systems seem to be off. I need a little dopamine, a little serotonin, a little THC, right? I don't need too much of one thing. I just need a boost of everything. And what I find with fibro patients specifically is a lot of them have that same problem, right? We know that our dopamine levels are low. We know that there is actually endocannabinoid deficiency, which is, you know, whether the receptors aren't working quite right or our own anandamide levels, that again, those marijuana-like compounds in our body, there's not enough of it. It's like, that's why we're pain, we're achy, we're fatigued, we're brain fog. Like we have all these symptoms and all these issues, and there's not one pill that makes it all better. You know, that sometimes there's pills that make the pain better, but like it doesn't resolve all those symptoms, right? With sleep issues, there's so many different things that are wrong. And, you know, to this day, no one's found a cure. You know, it's not like, here's the magic pill. Like we just keep trying to just help people not get worse, really. But like a lot of people are on disability. A lot of people are in pain and they're struggling. And so for me, you know, in order for me to, you know, manage stress, like that's my number one goal. If I'm stressed out, nothing I do helps. Like it's flare time, you know, and that's how it is with most autoimmune and other chronic pain disorders. You are stressed, your life is going to be miserable. So it's manage the stress. So I have like things I take for stress. And again, cannabis is one of those. Cannabis is great at reducing stress. You don't even know it. Like you're just able to handle things and not like get worked up. There's also mindset work and things like that. There's a couple things, you know, in play. But for me, kratom helped balance my opioid system and also helped me with like pelvic pain and things like that. So for example, I was, no matter what I did with cannabis, like it was really difficult to deal with. I have endometriosis. I have like cysts that like explode and things like that every once in a while. Like there's been times where literally I've woken up in an ambulance and been like, why is there a fentanyl drip in my arm? Where am I? Like, what is going on? And that was before I, you know, again, figured out my balance of all these different medicines. But I was very just sick and, you know, short of getting a hysterectomy and all that, you know, there was nothing that was really resolving that in modern medicine. And so for me, I'm able to use THC. I'm able to use the kratom. I'm able to use some of these other herbal medicines together, and I'm not on any prescription medication, and I'm doing fantastic. Like literally, I know what to do if I have a pain flare. Okay, I'm going to take more of this. I'm going to take more of this. I'm going to do my yoga. I'm going to get centered, and you know, like again, a lot of the mind because the mind controls the body. But having all these tools in the toolbox and knowing how to use them properly. And knowing when to use them, right? Like, I think for me, what's really important is that some people can become tolerant to cannabis. They can become tolerant to kratom, right? With any medication, right? If you take the same medication every day, you may need to use more of it over time. And that could lead to unwanted side effects. For example, like with kratom, because it's working in the opioid system, if you have to take larger doses, you're going to have more side effects like nausea or things like that. Like, it's not ideal, right? You don't want to be taking high levels of anything. So for me, being able to rotate things like, hey, I take kratom sometimes, I take cannabis sometimes, or I take very small amounts of these things, never enough to really get dependent on them. For me, that makes me feel like I'm in control, but it also, again, makes me very highly functioning. And so like, that's the complicated thing. Like a patient that's new to all this, they don't need to read like 8,000 papers like I did. It was like, read one of these books. If you're interested in kratom, read one of these books. If you're interested in CBD, here's like a little mini guide. And if you really want to know how to like rope this all together, you know, it's really important to talk to, you know, a functional medicine doctor or a coach who works in this field, right? To understand how to use all these, because it can be very complex. You're like, okay, I'm going to get off of all my 20 medications and like use all the plant medicines by yourself. you're not going to
No.
get it right.
Yeah.
And actually you can hurt yourself too. Like that's the thing. So for example, when people don't realize that you need to go low with these doses, right? Like THC, your first time with an edible, I took 50 milligrams. Like this is the worst. Cannabis is not for me. Like I've heard everything. I've talked to
Yes.
thousands of patients, especially through telehealth, and it's so funny, like what you hear where like, I will never use cannabis again. I was like, what did you do? Okay, this
Yes.
is not how you do it. Like, let's work through these bad experiences. But like, I wish honestly, the patients would have the right experiences
Right.
by, either educating themselves through books, YouTube videos. Like, there's so much information now on plant medicine, right? Like, let's do it right the first time so that, and like, don't wait too. Like, I know that we all learn things at different times, but goodness, like I wish I had, avoided a lot of the medical, I almost like malpractice that I went through. I'm
Mhm.
like, of being on all these horrible medications that almost killed me, right? And I had started off, with plant medicine, but oftentimes plant medicine is seen as the medicine of last resort. Okay, after we exhausted everything, maybe you can talk to a
Yeah.
cannabis doctor, right? And that's not right. That's not okay. After years of disability, finally let's talk about cannabis, right? Like let's talk about cannabis at first because it is a lot safer.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's talk about like, so people are out there might be like, okay, I want to give this a go. And I've been on your website and it's just like, wow, you have, I mean, as you've shared, she's basically used herself as a guinea pig. So, but you've also been able to, I see it as like really give the layman's term. You're not talking doctor talk. You're not talking, even though you've written the research papers, you write stuff that people can totally understand. So, how would you, like to advise those who are watching to like navigate your website, how to use it, the different things you have on there, and as well the services that you provide, and the blog that's on there, and your YouTube. So.
Yeah, so I'll be doing a lot more video. It's just so funny. Like everyone else, right? I was like, I went into that pandemic shell, and I'm like, I'm ready to get out, and show up too. But in terms of how to learn more about my books, how to if you want to work with me on a deeper level to really navigate some of the plant medicine, especially if you're having challenges with it, you've tried it, it hasn't worked, right? The best place to start on my website, drmichelleross.com, would be drmichelleross.com/IPAT, IPAT. I run the Institute of Plant Assisted Therapy. So on there, you can find freebies, including the one I think I mentioned for this summit on a guide to CBD safety. Like, what should you take or what should you think about when you're looking for a CBD product? If you can't answer these questions, like where did my CBD come from? Like, don't buy it.
Right.
But I have a lot of free guides for patients and professionals that are thinking about working with plant medicine. Like, what is your favorite plant medicine? What might be right for you? Like, there's a quiz on there. Like, there's a lot of different things. Links to my books, links to courses. I cover everything from like cannabis and motherhood to intro to fibromyalgia and cannabis. Like there's a lot there for everyone, with both free resources and, paid things for people that want to dive in a little bit deeper. But I would say, if you're interested, though, any of those books, CBD Oil for Health is a great, great read and intro for somebody who's new to this.
Yeah, and thank you. She will be giving that. The link will be below for the CBD guide so that you can, start with that. Because as she said, and this is why I have her here, is we don't need to wait to get too sick on pharmaceuticals or find out that it doesn't work for us and that now we have all these other side effects. You can go straight to the alternative. You don't have to go through all of the things just because the doctor recommended. And even this doctor will tell you she's told doctors not to give her certain stuff, and they do. So you have the patient right to refuse. I always said that I'm like, you have the right to refuse any medication, any treatment, anything, and find a different one. So here she is to really share all that wisdom and her own journey. And I thank you so much, Dr. Ross, for all of your knowledge. And I'm sorry you did have to go through all of that stuff, but as they say, sometimes it is for a reason. And here you are serving a bigger community and are a big voice and advocate for the plant medicine. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, I hope if it helps one single person be convinced that they should try it, I'm telling you, it's like once you try it and you learn how to use it properly, it changes your life and you ask yourself, why didn't I do this earlier? So, and if it has worked for you, I tell everyone, my big ask is tell somebody else because
Yes.
again, you could literally be saving their life.
So true. And which is why I have you here, because I've told so many people, I've gotten myself off of I don't know how many things with injuries I've had, and they've wanted to keep me on that stuff. And I'm just like, absolutely not. So thank you for being that advocate and for standing up for the plant medicines. I'm sure they're all very happy with you as well. So
Thank you.
all right, everyone. So thank you. And we're going to go on to the next speaker. So if you need to take a bio break, get some tea, stretch your legs. And in the meantime, stay happy, healthy, positive, and enjoy the rest of your never before lived day. Bye-bye. Thank you, Ms.